Welcome to Her Secret Truth, a place where the truth always comes out. Here you'll hear stories of family betrayals, hidden secrets, and shocking revelations. Every story is a step closer to the truth someone tried to hide. Subscribe to Her Secret Truth so you don't miss new stories you won't be able to stop watching. My daughter tossed my house keys onto the counter like she owned the place and announced, without even looking at me, that she expected breakfast ready at 5 a.m. tomorrow for her new husband, who apparently likes everything done his way. 24 hours later, I was setting their alarm for 4 a.m., but what I had planned for their morning coffee was the kind of wake-up call they'd never forget. Let me back up and tell you how we got there, because what happened next changed everything. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe. My name is Judith Holloway, and at 52, I thought I'd already experienced every possible way my daughter could disappoint me. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday in late August when Elena showed up at my Malibu beach house with her brand new husband, 3 enormous suitcases, and an attitude that could have powered the entire Pacific Coast Highway. I was sitting on the deck, enjoying my morning coffee and watching the waves roll in, when a car door slammed hard enough to rattle the glass. Through the sliding doors, I saw my 28-year-old daughter marching up the steps, a man I'd never seen before trailing behind her like a well-dressed shadow. "Mom!" she called out, pushing through the door without knocking. "We're here." Here for what, exactly? Because I certainly hadn't invited anyone. The last time we'd spoken was 3 weeks earlier, when she'd hung up on me for suggesting that marrying someone she'd known for 6 months might be fast. "Elena," I said, stepping inside with my coffee still in hand. "What a surprise." She was already dragging suitcases toward the guest staircase. Her husband hovered near the door, clearly unsure whether he should follow or apologize. "Smart man." "Adrian, this is my mother, Judith," she said briskly. "Mom, this is Adrian, my husband." She emphasized husband the way people do when they want you to understand that a major life decision has already been made without your input. Adrian stepped forward with a polished smile and extended his hand. "Mrs. Holloway, it's wonderful to finally meet you. Elena talks about this place all the time." "Does she?" I shook his hand, noting the expensive watch and the perfectly tailored shirt. "And what brings you both to my little sanctuary?" I asked. "Unannounced. We're on our honeymoon," Elena said, as if that explained everything. "We wanted somewhere peaceful and private. Hotels are so impersonal, don't you think?" I glanced around my living room, my yoga mat still unrolled, paintbrushes soaking in a coffee mug, a romance novel face down on the couch. "How long were you planning to stay?" I asked. "Just a few days," Adrian said quickly, shooting Elena a look. "Maybe a week," Elena corrected. "We haven't really decided. That's the beauty of being spontaneous, right, Mom? You always said life was about embracing the unexpected." I had said that when she was 16 and terrified of auditioning for the school play. I hadn't meant it as permission to turn my home into a free honeymoon resort. "Of course," I said, because what else could I say? "Let me show you the guest room." As we went upstairs, I caught Adrian looking around, not admiring exactly but evaluating, like someone mentally calculating square footage and market value. The beach house had been my sanctuary for 5 years, ever since my divorce. Modest by Malibu standards, but still worth more than most people's retirement plans. "This is beautiful, Mrs. Holloway," Adrian said. "You have incredible taste." I opened the guest room door, already planning to change the sheets and remove the boxes of Christmas decorations piled on the bed. "I wasn't expecting company," I said. "Give me a few minutes to make it habitable." "Don't go to any trouble," Elena said, bouncing on the mattress. "We're just happy to be here." Happy? That afternoon, while they walked along the beach, I prepared the room and tried to understand why this visit felt different from Elena's usual dramatic entrances. Maybe it was the way Adrian had looked at the house. Maybe it was the fact that she'd gotten married without telling me. Whatever it was, I felt it settle in my chest like a warning. By dinner time, I knew exactly what was wrong. Adrian stepped outside to take a call, and Elena poured herself a glass of my good wine without asking. "Mom," she said, dropping onto my couch like it belonged to her. "We need to talk." "I'm listening." "Adrian and I didn't come here just to enjoy ourselves." She paused for effect, slowly turning the wine in her glass. We're here because we think it's time for you to take a serious look at how you're living. My living situation? I kept my voice steady, even as an uneasy chill settled in my chest. You're out here all by yourself. What if something happened? What if you slipped or had an emergency? Adrian believes, and I agree, that it would be safer for you to live somewhere smaller. Maybe closer to town. A nice condo, perhaps. I studied my daughter, the woman I had cared for through countless illnesses, stood by during her reckless 20s, and continued to love even as her selfishness grew more pronounced with every passing year. So you decided to just show up and convince me to give up my house. Not exactly give it up, she said, taking another sip and still refusing to meet my eyes. Adrian has experience with real estate investments. He thinks this property could be far better used if it were properly managed. Everything suddenly snapped into place. The surprise visit. The polished new husband with expensive tastes. The suggestion that I was too old and fragile to manage my own life. How considerate of Adrian to be so invested in my well-being. Mom, don't make this sound negative. We're trying to help you. Help me how, exactly? By steering my finances? You could live very comfortably off the proceeds from this place, and Adrian could oversee all the investment details. It would be like having your own personal financial advisor. For 28 years, I had watched my daughter justify her choices with impressive confidence. But this surpassed even her usual efforts. She had married a man I barely knew and was now sitting in my living room, suggesting I hand my home over to him for management. That's very generous, I said evenly. But I'm perfectly satisfied with how I'm living now. Her smile tightened. You're not getting any younger, Mom. Wouldn't it be smarter to make these changes while you can still enjoy the benefits? Right then, Adrian returned from his phone call, charm firmly back in place. Sorry about that. Business never really stops, you know how it is. Actually, I replied. What kind of business are you in, Adrian? Property development and investment consulting. I help people get the most out of their real estate. How convenient. We sat there in thick silence, the tension almost tangible. Adrian seemed to realize Elena's softer approach wasn't working. He leaned forward, adopting a tone that likely served him well in boardrooms. Mrs. Holloway, I hope you don't feel we're overstepping. Elena just worries about you. And when she told me about this beautiful property sitting here underused. Underused? Well, for one person it's a lot of house. I glanced around the room. The floor-to-ceiling windows facing the ocean. The fireplace where I'd spent countless quiet evenings reading. The kitchen where I'd learned to cook for myself and discovered I actually enjoyed it. You're right, I said at last. It is a lot of house for one person. That's exactly why it suits me. The following morning was when Elena crossed a line she couldn't undo. I was making scrambled eggs when she spoke, her tone sharp and authoritative, without even looking up from her phone. Mom, we need to talk about expectations. What expectations? Adrian was seated at the kitchen counter, scrolling through financial news on his tablet and making soft humming sounds, as though my home had already become his workspace. Since we're staying here, she said, I think it's important we set some clear ground rules. Elena finally lifted her head, and I caught that familiar look, the one she used to get as a teenager right before saying something she knew I wouldn't like. Ground rules. I repeated, turning the eggs as they sizzled in the pan, already more appealing than this conversation. Adrian has very specific needs in the morning, she said. He's an early riser. Likes to start the day properly. Good nutrition, a quiet space, and uninterrupted time for his East Coast calls. I glanced at Adrian. He was nodding along, as if his wife were describing something entirely reasonable rather than laying out service expectations in a house that wasn't hers. That sounds like Adrian's responsibility, I said calmly. Actually, Mom, I was hoping you could help with that. Her voice slipped into that coaxing tone she used when she was 7 and negotiating an extra bedtime story. You're already up early, and you love to cook. I love cooking for myself, I replied. On my schedule. Adrian finally looked up from his tablet, flashing a smile that suggested expensive dental work. Mrs. Holloway, what Elena means is we'd truly appreciate any help you're willing to offer as our host. Host? As though I'd invited them to take over my home and place breakfast orders. I see, I said, focusing on the stove before my expression gave me away. It doesn't need to be anything fancy, Elena added, clearly interpreting my silence as agreement. Just something ready by 5. Adrian likes his coffee strong, no sugar, and maybe eggs Benedict or fresh fruit. Simple. 5 a.m. That meant a 4 o'clock alarm to prepare eggs Benedict for her husband of 6 days. The same man who thought my home was underutilized. Eggs Benedict, I repeated slowly. Or whatever you think works best, she said brightly. You're so good at domestic things, Mom. It's really one of your strengths. One of my strengths, like domestic labor, was a gift meant to be shared rather than a skill I developed to support my own independence. The next morning, I served breakfast and watched Adrian slice into his eggs with the confidence of someone who had never cooked a meal for himself. He struck me as the type who'd always been surrounded by women eager to anticipate his needs. This is excellent, he said. You're quite the chef, Mrs. Holloway. Perfect practice for downsizing, Elena added, unable to resist circling back. You'll have so much more time to cook without all this space to maintain. After breakfast, they announced they were heading into town and would be back for dinner, spoken as though my role had already been assigned. As their rental car disappeared down the driveway, I wasn't thinking about menus. I was thinking about alarm clocks, and exactly what kind of response Adrian's 5 a.m. expectation deserved. That afternoon I did some research. Not the kind Adrian would appreciate. I pulled out my laptop and started with property records and business filings. Adrian Romano owned 3 LLCs. 2 had been dissolved within the past year. His property development company listed a single project, a small riverside apartment building currently in foreclosure. Interesting. I kept going. Adrian had been married once before, to Megan O'Connor, former owner of a successful catering business in San Diego. The business had been sold abruptly 2 years ago, right around the time their divorce was finalized. Even more interesting. Then I found a brief article in a Riverside newspaper. Elderly homeowners had filed suit against an investment firm for pressuring them to sell below market value, promising monthly payouts that never came. The company name? Castellaniano Holdings LLC. By the time Elena and Adrian returned from their shopping trip, arms loaded with boutique bags, I knew exactly why they were here. And I had a plan. How was your day? I asked as they came inside. Wonderful, Elena said, dropping her bags on my coffee table. We found an amazing real estate office. The agent said homes like this are incredibly desirable. She mentioned that similar properties were selling well above asking price. Really? Adrian nodded eagerly. The coastal market is extremely strong right now. It might be the perfect time to act if you were considering it. I've been thinking about what you both said, I replied, watching their quick exchange of satisfaction. I knew you'd see the logic, Elena said. Oh, the logic is very clear. I smiled at Adrian. And I've been thinking about your breakfast requirements too. 5 a.m. is quite early. I know it's an imposition, Adrian said, though his tone suggested he didn't find it imposing at all. He sounded more pleased than apologetic. But I really do function better with a proper start to the day. Of course you do. I completely understand. I looked directly at him, noting the way he was already relaxing into what he thought was victory. I'll make sure everything is ready for you tomorrow morning. Something special. You're the best, Mom, Elena said, kissing my cheek like we just finalized a business agreement, rather than discuss my role as their unpaid household staff. That evening, I served dinner on my good china and listened as they casually discussed plans for maximizing the property's potential, as if I weren't sitting right there. They talked about removing walls, updating fixtures, and creating multiple revenue streams through vacation rentals. They were carving up my home like it already belonged to them. After they went upstairs, I cleaned the kitchen and then sat on my deck with a glass of wine, listening to the waves and thinking carefully about breakfast. Adrian wanted everything his way, and he valued routine above all else. Perfect. I was going to give him exactly what he had asked for. At 4 o'clock in the morning, my alarm went off just as promised. Adrian and Elena had no idea what they had truly requested when they decided I would be their personal breakfast service. I moved quietly through the dark kitchen, muscle memory guiding me as I prepared what would certainly be the most memorable morning Adrian had experienced in a long time. The sun was still hours from rising, but I was fully awake and completely focused. Coffee first. Adrian liked it strong, no sugar. I ground the beans fresh exactly the way he specified and brewed a full pot. While it finished, I set the counter carefully. Instead of placing just a plate in front of his seat, I arranged a neat stack of papers beside the cup. Property records, public court filings, a printed copy of the Riverside article about Castellaniano Holdings LLC, highlighted sections, dates, names, everything laid out cleanly and clearly like a financial report. I prepared Eggs Benedict as requested, picture perfect, the way only decades of experience can manage. For Elena, I made simple scrambled eggs and toast. She hadn't demanded anything special, so she received exactly what she'd always expected from me. At exactly 4:47, I heard movement upstairs. Adrian's internal clock was as precise as his expectations. Mrs. Holloway? He appeared in the kitchen wearing an expensive silk robe, clearly surprised to see everything ready. You actually did this. You said 5. I aim to please. He sat at the counter and I poured the coffee into my finest china cup, placing it directly in front of him, right beside the documents. This smells fantastic, he said, glancing down. You really didn't have to go to all this trouble. No trouble at all. I watched him take his first sip and then noticed the papers. I believe in giving people exactly what they ask for. Adrian frowned slightly as he picked up the top page, enthusiasm fading into confusion. He stopped eating. What's this? He asked. Breakfast, I said calmly. And information. Since you like to start your day prepared. The silence that followed was far more satisfying than any reaction I could have planned. He complimented the eggs, praised the coffee, and told me how much he appreciated having someone who understood the importance of routine. You're quite the hostess, he said, finishing his last bite. Elena was right when she said you had a gift for this. I have many gifts, I replied. Some of them take longer to reveal themselves than others. Elena eventually wandered downstairs in her pajamas, looking like she'd expected to find me already cleaning up after her husband's breakfast. Oh good. You actually did it, she said, as if there had ever been any doubt. Of course I did. I always do what I say I'm going to do. This is exactly what I was talking about yesterday, she continued, helping herself to coffee. You're so good at taking care of people. It's really what makes you happy. Taking care of people as opposed to having my own life, my own interests, my own schedule. According to my daughter, my highest calling was serving breakfast to her husband at dawn. I live to serve, I said, and neither of them noticed the tone. Adrian excused himself to shower and get ready for his morning calls. I cleaned the kitchen while Elena sat at the counter scrolling through her phone, occasionally commenting on how nice it was not to have to think about breakfast. Adrian is really impressed with you, she said eventually. He said you remind him of his grandmother. Everything always ready, everything organized. His grandmother. I was 52 years old. I think this arrangement could really work, Elena went on. You get to feel useful and needed. We get quality family time. And Adrian gets an environment that helps him be productive. About 45 minutes later, I heard Adrian's voice drift down from upstairs, tight strained. Elena? Where's the bathroom again? Upstairs hall, first door on the right, she called without looking up. I found it, but is there another one? I continued wiping down counters that were already spotless. Mom, Adrian called again, this time sharper. Do you have any antacids or something? In the medicine cabinet, I said calmly. Are you feeling unwell? Just my stomach. Probably stress. Big calls today. Elena finally looked up. Adrian, are you okay? I'm fine, he said quickly. Just need a minute. Over the next hour, he made repeated trips back and forth. Each time he returned, he looked more unsettled, less composed. The confident posture from breakfast had vanished, replaced by tension and irritation. I don't understand, Elena muttered. He never gets like this. Some people don't react well when their routine is disrupted, I said mildly. But nothing was disrupted, she snapped. You did everything perfectly. Exactly. Adrian appeared in the doorway, pale and frustrated, his phone clenched in his hand. I need to postpone my calls, he said tightly. I can't concentrate like this. Elena stared at him. Postpone? Adrian, these are important. So is my health, he shot back. I thought this place was supposed to be calming. I met his eyes. Maybe unfamiliar environments take adjustment, I said. Not everyone functions well outside their own space. The silence that followed was heavy and very telling. Should I take you to the hospital? Elena's voice was tipping into panic, which I had to admit was almost as satisfying as watching Adrian's mounting misery. Let's give it a little time, I said gently. Sometimes these things need to work their way through your system. Mrs. Holloway, I hate to ask, but do you have any Pepto-Bismol or Imodium? Anything at all? I'll take a look. I rummaged through the medicine cabinet and came back with a bottle of antacids, the kind that would be entirely useless for what he was dealing with. This might help. Adrian swallowed 4 tablets without hesitation and headed back upstairs. For the rest of the morning, the house echoed with hurried footsteps between the bedroom and bathroom, broken only by Elena's worried questions and Adrian's increasingly strained replies. By lunchtime, he couldn't manage the stairs. Mom, I really think we need to take him to urgent care, Elena said. He's been sick for hours. If you think that's best, I agreed. Though sometimes stomach issues do have to run their course. This isn't just a stomach issue, Mom. This is serious. I met her gaze, concern carefully arranged. You may be right. Food poisoning can be dangerous if it gets severe. When they finally left for the clinic, Adrian shuffled out looking like he'd aged 10 years in half a day. Mrs. Holloway, I'm so sorry, he said weakly. I don't know what happened. These things can be unpredictable, I replied. I hope you feel better soon. We might be gone a while, Elena said as she helped him into the car. Don't wait up. I watched them drive away. Adrian hunched forward as if even sitting upright was risky. Once they were gone, I returned to the kitchen and quietly disposed of what remained hidden in the spice cabinet. By the next morning, Adrian would likely feel much better, but I doubted he'd ever again demand breakfast at 5 a.m. And this was only the beginning. They spent 3 hours at urgent care before being sent home with instructions to hydrate and rest. When they returned that afternoon, Adrian looked like a man who'd lost a private war. The doctor said it was probably something he ate yesterday. Elena explained while helping him upstairs. Bland foods only for a few days. How awful, I said, following with a pitcher of ice water. I feel terrible. What if it was something I served this morning? No, Mom. They said the timing doesn't match. Breakfast would have hit much sooner. Adrian collapsed onto the bed. I'm really sorry, Mrs. Holloway. I know we've disrupted your routine. Don't worry about that, I said, arranging pillows behind his back. Your only job is to rest. The rest of the day passed with Adrian confined to bed and Elena hovering anxiously. I made a simple chicken broth and served it on a tray, playing the concerned hostess flawlessly. You're incredibly kind, Adrian murmured. I don't know what we'd have done if we were staying at a hotel. That's what family is for, I replied, noting how quickly he embraced the word when he needed care. That evening, while Adrian slept fitfully upstairs, Elena and I sat on the deck watching the sun sink into the ocean. I'm worried about him, she said. He never gets sick. He's so careful. Stress can lower immunity, I said. New marriage. Travel. Big decisions. She glanced at me. What big decisions? Selling this house would be a major one, I said evenly. I'm sure Adrian feels responsible for helping guide that choice. She nodded slowly. Actually, he has some proposals he wanted to go over with you. I smiled into the sunset. I'm sure he does. He really knows what he's doing, Mom. He's helped other people in situations like this. Situations like vulnerable homeowners being guided by a man with expensive taste and collapsing businesses. I'd be very interested to hear his ideas, I said calmly. Once he's feeling better, of course. The next morning, Adrian appeared from the guest room looking noticeably improved, though still tentative. He'd clearly spent the night avoiding anything substantial, which told me my little surprise had worked exactly as planned. How are you feeling? I asked as he cautiously sipped the herbal tea I'd made. Much better, thank you. I think the worst has passed. I'm relieved. Being sick away from home is miserable. He nodded, then let his eyes wander around my kitchen, that familiar, calculating look settling in. Mrs. Holloway, I was hoping we could revisit the conversation we started a few days ago, about your living situation. Of course, I've actually been thinking about it. His expression brightened. You have? In fact, yesterday made me realize how isolated I am here. If something serious happened, no one would even know. Elena appeared in the doorway, rope tied loosely. See, Mom? That's exactly what we've been saying. You've both made your point very clearly. I poured Adrian more tea, watching closely for any hint that he might revive his breakfast expectations. You mentioned you've helped others with property decisions, Adrian. Absolutely. It's a specialty of mine. Helping seniors transition out of properties they can no longer manage and into more suitable living arrangements. Seniors. I was 52 and he was already placing me in that category. And you handle everything? Financial details, logistics? All of it. Valuation, market analysis, negotiations, and investment planning afterward. My clients don't have to deal with any of the complexity. Your clients, I repeated. How many people have you helped this way? Adrian glanced briefly at Elena. Several. I recently worked with a lovely elderly woman in Riverside who was overwhelmed by maintaining her family home. The same woman whose property I knew was now in foreclosure. That sounds ideal, I said pleasantly. I'd love to understand the process better. First, we'd assess the property's value. Then review your finances, expenses, obligations. After that, I'd present options for maximizing returns. The sale would go directly through my company. It's far more efficient than traditional agents who don't understand the unique needs of older homeowners. I nodded. You've clearly given this a lot of thought. I have. Decisions like this can be incredibly stressful for someone in your position. Having professional guidance makes all the difference. Someone in my position, helpless, overwhelmed, and in need of rescue. Adrian, I said, leaning in slightly, would it be possible to see documentation from your previous work? Testimonials, case studies, anything like that? Of course. I have a full portfolio back in Riverside. I can have my assistant send it over. I'd appreciate that. For the next hour, Adrian outlined his vision for my future. I would sell the house to his investment company at what he described as fair market value, determined by his evaluation. The proceeds would be invested under his management, providing monthly income while the principal continued to grow. I would relocate to a small condo in a senior community, free from maintenance and security concerns. Adrian would oversee everything for a modest management fee. It was an excellent plan. For Adrian. When he finished, I smiled. This all sounds very polished. I'm impressed by how thoroughly you've thought it through. I believe in preparation, he said confidently. So did I. Adrian explained that the real estate market could shift quickly, which made timing everything. And you believe now is the right moment? I asked. Without a doubt. The market is strong, interest rates are favorable, and honestly, Mrs. Holloway, this is the ideal time to make a move, before circumstances force your hand. Circumstances like illness or a financial emergency, the kind that would leave me exposed to exactly the pressure he was applying right now. I appreciate your concern for my well-being, I said evenly. It's reassuring to see how invested you are in my future security. Adrian smiled, clearly convinced he'd succeeded in guiding a lonely middle-aged woman toward handing over her most valuable asset. What he didn't know was that while he'd been recovering from his mysterious illness the day before, I'd been busy. I'd made several phone calls of my own, to the elderly woman in Riverside whose house he'd helped sell, to his ex-wife in San Diego, and to a private investigator who specialized in real estate fraud. Adrian thought he was closing in on his next opportunity. He had no idea he was stepping directly into a trap. Adrian, I said, rising from the kitchen table, I think I'm ready to move forward with your proposal. The flash of victory that crossed his face almost made the past week tolerable. That's wonderful news, Mrs. Holloway, he said, already reaching for his phone. I can have my team begin the assessment as soon as tomorrow. Actually, I said, lifting a hand, I'd like a few other people involved in the discussion. Financial matters can get complicated at my age. His smile faltered. Other people? Yes. My attorney for one. And my financial advisor. A decision this significant really does require legal review. Elena frowned. Mom, I didn't know you had a financial advisor. Oh, I do. Stephen Aldrich. He's managed my investments since the divorce. Very conservative, but he's kept me quite comfortable. I glanced at Adrian. I'm sure the two of you will have plenty to discuss when it comes to strategy. He nodded, but I could see the calculation starting behind his eyes. Real professionals were not part of his preferred audience. Of course, he said carefully. I always encourage independent verification. It's good business practice. I knew you'd understand. Oh, and I've also invited Megan O'Connor. The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might actually sit down. Megan O'Connor? Yes. Your ex-wife. Such a pleasant woman. We had a very interesting conversation yesterday while you were resting. Elena looked between us. Mom, why would you talk to Adrian's ex-wife? Just doing my due diligence, I replied lightly. When someone offers to manage my financial future, I like to understand their background. Adrian went completely still, staring at me as if I just pulled a weapon. Megan shared some fascinating details about your business practices, I continued, especially regarding her catering company, the one that was sold so suddenly before your divorce. Mrs. Holloway, Adrian said slowly, I think there may have been some misunderstandings. I don't believe so. She was very clear about how you convinced her to use her business as collateral for property investments that didn't turn out as planned. Elena's voice sharpened. Adrian, what is she talking about? It's complicated, honey. Megan and I had disagreements during the marriage. She's still bitter. About the divorce? I asked. Or about losing her life's work to cover your failed ventures? Adrian stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I think there's been a serious miscommunication. No, I said calmly. I think the situation is finally very clear. You've been quite open about your intentions, Adrian. Selling my home to your company, controlling the proceeds, moving me into a position where I depend entirely on your judgment. That's not how I'd put it. Then how would you describe what you did for Ruth Caldwell in Riverside? He actually stepped back. How do you know her name? Oh, we've spoken. Quite a bit. She's very interested in seeing you again, I added calmly. Something about wanting to discuss why her monthly payments stopped, and why her former home is now tied up in foreclosure. Elena stared at her husband, her expression shifting from confusion to alarm. Adrian, what is she talking about? Elena, he said quickly, your mother has been listening to people who don't understand legitimate business practices. Legitimate business practices? I echoed. Is that what you call persuading elderly homeowners to sell below market value, promising steady income, and then quietly cutting off payments once the paperwork is signed? Those are complex financial arrangements, Adrian snapped. Market fluctuations. Or fraud, I interrupted. And sometimes fraud is exposed right around the time the con artist's new wife realizes she's married to one. The warmth vanished from his face, leaving only something sharp and calculating underneath. You don't know what you're talking about, he said flatly. And you don't have proof of any wrongdoing. Actually, I do. Quite a bit. Stephen Aldrich, my financial advisor, is also a forensic accountant. He's taken a particular interest in Romano Holdings LLC. Adrian froze. You don't have access to those records. No, but the state of California does. Especially after multiple complaints alleging fraudulent practices. I reached across the counter and picked up the manila folder I placed there earlier. Would you like to see the complaint I filed yesterday with the Attorney General's office? You did what? Elena whispered. Filed a detailed report outlining a pattern of elder financial exploitation along the coast. I included Ruth Caldwell's documentation, Megan's sworn statement, and an analysis of how your so-called investment structures actually function. Elena sank into the chair. Mom, are you saying Adrian is a criminal? I'm saying Adrian targets women he believes are vulnerable and isolated. I spread the documents out in front of her. Women like his ex-wife, who trusted him with her business. Women like Ruth Caldwell, who thought she was securing her future. Women like me, who he assumed would be grateful for male guidance and protection. Adrian edged toward the kitchen doorway. And the clever part of your plan, Adrian, was using my daughter. Marry the access point. Convince her she's helping. Wrap the entire scheme in family loyalty so no one asks questions. Elena, we need to go. Now. But Elena didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on him. The rush to get married, she said slowly. You said it was romantic. You wanted legal cover. Don't listen to her, Adrian snapped. She's paranoid. I'm 52, Adrian. Not old. Not paranoid. And certainly not helpless. I stood, folder still in my hands. And I'm not someone who can be bullied by a failed real estate developer with a record of exploiting women. He bolted for the stairs. I didn't try to stop him. The California State Police will be very interested in your travel history, I called after him. Especially now that you're officially under investigation for elder fraud. He turned back once, fury twisting his face. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Actually, Adrian, I know exactly who you are. The real question is whether you understand who you tried to con. Upstairs, drawers slammed. A phone rang. He was packing, calling lawyers, or maybe warning someone else, but it was far too late. Elena remained at the table, staring at the evidence. Mom, she said quietly. Did I really bring a criminal into your house? You brought someone who saw you as a means to reach me. The crime was simply the method. I thought he loved me. He may have. But he loved my property more. What happens now? I met her gaze. Now you decide whether you're part of the solution or part of the damage. 20 minutes later, Adrian was gone, tearing down the driveway in their rental car like the house was burning behind him. What he left was my daughter. The truth spread across my kitchen table, and his abandoned phone, buzzing nonstop with missed calls he didn't dare answer. Mom, Elena said at last, her voice small and hollow. How long have you known? I suspected something was wrong the moment you both arrived talking about my living situation, I said. But I didn't have proof until yesterday. I sat across from her, struck by how young she looked without Adrian's confidence propping her up. The real question is, how much did you know? Nothing, she said quickly. I swear it. I thought he was legitimate. He showed me financial documents, client testimonials. Everything looked professional. Did it ever occur to you to wonder why a successful investment consultant would be so eager to marry someone he'd known for 6 months? Her face crumpled. I thought he loved me. He was charming, attentive. He made me feel special. You are special, I said gently. But Adrian wasn't interested in special. He was interested in access. Adrian's abandoned phone buzzed again. I glanced at the screen and felt my stomach drop. Ruth Caldwell. Elena, I need to answer this. Mrs. Romano? The elderly woman's voice trembled. I've been trying to reach Adrian all morning. The bank called again about foreclosure. And I don't understand what's happening. This is Judith Holloway, I said carefully. Adrian's mother-in-law. I'm afraid Adrian isn't available. Oh, maybe you can help me then, she said, relief mixing with fear. I gave Adrian all my legal documents when he bought my house. He promised the mortgage would be paid off and I'd receive monthly payments, but those stopped 3 months ago. Now the bank says I still owe everything. I closed my eyes, nausea rising. This woman had trusted him with her home, and he'd left her facing homelessness. Mrs. Caldwell, I said steadily, I'm going to give you some phone numbers. Please call them today. They can help you. After I gave her the contact information for the State Attorney General's Elder Fraud Unit and a nonprofit legal aid organization, I ended the call and turned to Elena. That's what your husband does, I said quietly. He preys on women who trust him. But I'm not old, she whispered. I don't have assets he could steal. No, I said. You have something more valuable. You have me. She sat in silence, the reality sinking in. She was legally married to a man facing multiple fraud charges. Even if she'd been innocent, the fallout would follow her for years. What do I do now? She asked. You choose. You can warn Adrian and help him evade consequences, or you can cooperate and protect yourself. You make it sound simple. It is simple, I said, taking her hand. Not easy. Simple. Adrian is a criminal, Elena. The only question is whether you're going to be his accomplice or his victim. That afternoon, Detective Maya Lin from the California State Police Financial Crimes Division arrived with a briefcase and a look of sharp focus. Mrs. Holloway, she said, settling into the living room, your complaint opened a much larger investigation than we anticipated. How much larger? Mr. Romano appears to have operated across multiple states for 5 years. We've identified at least 12 victims, mostly women over 60 with valuable property. 12, I repeated, thinking of Ruth's shaking voice. At least. The pattern is consistent, Detective Lin continued. He gains trust through personal relationships, assumes control of property management, then drains assets. Elena spoke up quietly from the corner. What's going to happen to me? That depends, Detective Lynn said evenly. What you knew when you knew it, and whether you're willing to cooperate. I'll cooperate, Elena said immediately. I'll tell you everything. For 3 hours we did exactly that. Elena described Adrian's contacts, travel, and methods. I shared everything I'd uncovered. His prior victims and his attempts to manipulate me. As Detective Lynn stood to leave, she paused. You may have stopped him from finding several more victims. Most people don't investigate the person their child brings home, I said. Most people don't have daughters who demand breakfast service at 5 in the morning. After the detective left, Elena and I sat on the deck watching the sun sink into the ocean. We were both wrung out, the day's revelations hanging between us like heavy air. Mom, she said at last, her voice barely above a whisper. I owe you an enormous apology. For bringing him here. For how we treated you. For everything. You owe me more than an apology, Elena, I replied quietly. You owe me an explanation for how you could watch your husband treat me like hired help and think that was acceptable. She swallowed. I know. I was so caught up in feeling important, being married to someone successful, that I lost sight of what was right. You've always had a weakness for appearances, I said, not unkindly. But this time, your judgment brought a predator into my home. How do I make this right? I looked at my daughter, a woman who had spent her adult life making impulsive choices and expecting others to absorb the consequences. You start by taking responsibility, I said, for your decisions and their impact. And then you figure out who you are when you're not trying to impress someone who was using you. That evening, Adrian finally called. Not my phone, but Elena's. She looked at me before answering. Put it on speaker, I said. Elena, thank God. Adrian's voice burst out, tight with panic. Are you okay? Where are you? I'm still at my mother's house, she said calmly. Where are you? I'm in Nevada. Listen, baby. Your mother has been telling lies about me to the police. She's trying to destroy us. What kind of lies, Adrian? She filed some false complaint, claiming I defrauded people. It's fabricated. I just need to lay low until my lawyer sorts it out. Adrian, Elena said slowly, I spoke to Ruth Caldwell today. Silence. She told me about her house, the payments that stopped, the foreclosure. Elena, that's complicated business stuff. Market conditions. Adrian, I said, leaning toward the phone. This is Judith. You should know that your wife has decided to cooperate fully with the investigation. Elena, don't listen to her, he snapped. She's a bitter old woman trying to ruin our marriage. Our marriage was ruined when you used it to commit fraud, Elena said, and I felt a sharp swell of pride at the steadiness in her voice. Elena, please. I love you. We can fix this. No, Adrian. We can't. She ended the call and powered off her phone. That felt good, she said softly, surprised. It should, I replied. That night, Elena helped me lock every door and window. Adrian was desperate now, and desperate people are unpredictable. But I wasn't afraid. He had spent a week believing he was manipulating a helpless middle-aged woman. He had no idea I'd been several steps ahead from the start. The next morning, while Elena slept, I joined a conference call with Detective Lynn, Stephen Aldridge, my forensic accountant, and Megan O'Connor, Adrian's ex-wife, who had flown in from San Diego to testify. The evidence you gathered is extraordinary, Megan said. I wish someone had been watching out for me when Adrian destroyed my business. What exactly did he do to your catering company? I asked. The same thing he tried to do to you, she said. He convinced me to use it as collateral for a sure-thing investment. When it failed because it was designed to fail, I lost everything. Stephen cleared his throat. The financial trail suggests this wasn't incompetence. It was intentional. He moved funds from victim accounts into offshore holdings he controlled. So he was stealing, Megan said quietly. Yes, Stephen replied. A calculated embezzlement scheme disguised as investment consulting. Detective Lynn's voice was grim. We've identified the same pattern across all 12 known victims. The good news, Detective Lynn said, is that we now have enough evidence to pursue federal charges. The bad news is that most of the stolen funds have already been moved beyond our immediate reach. What about Adrian's location? I asked. We have eyes on the Nevada border, and his credit cards are flagged, she replied. He can't stay hidden forever. After the call ended, Elena came downstairs, looking like she hadn't slept at all. Any news? She asked. Your husband is officially a federal fugitive, I said, pouring her coffee. The FBI issued a warrant this morning. She wrapped her hands around the mug. So it's really over. The marriage is, I said gently. The criminal part is just beginning. Adrian will be caught, prosecuted, and if justice does its job, sent to prison. But the personal part? Recovering from being married to a con artist, that takes time. She nodded, then hesitated. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. When did you know for sure that Adrian was a fraud? I thought about it while scrambling eggs. Honestly, the moment he suggested I needed help managing my own life. Men like Adrian always reveal themselves when they assume women are helpless. I fell for it completely. You fell for the charm, I said, setting her plate down. That's different. Adrian is very good at making people feel important, needed, chosen. Wanting that doesn't make you foolish. Then why didn't you fall for it? Because I spent the last 5 years learning how to live with only my own opinion of myself, I said. When someone shows up offering guidance I didn't ask for, my instinct isn't gratitude, it's suspicion. Elena was quiet for a moment. I've never lived alone. I've always had roommates, boyfriends, someone else helping me decide things. That's exactly what Adrian was counting on. That afternoon, the sound of a car pulling into my driveway interrupted the calm. It wasn't Adrian. A black sedan with government plates stopped outside. Mrs. Holloway? A tall man in a suit stepped forward. I'm Agent Martinez with the FBI Financial Crimes Task Force. He was joined by a woman who introduced herself as Agent Kim. Both had the serious, measured presence of people used to dealing with large-scale fraud. Adrian contacted you last night, Agent Martinez said, activating a recorder. He called my daughter, I replied. We saved the call. Agent Kim leaned forward. We'd like you to consider making another one. I frowned. What kind of call? Adrian is running out of options, Martinez said. His offshore accounts are frozen. His associates are under surveillance. We believe he may try to return here to retrieve something he left behind. He left a phone and some clothes, I said. Nothing valuable. Martinez slid a tablet across the table. Are you sure? The photo showed my guest's bedroom, focused on a corner I hadn't examined closely. Behind a decorative plant sat something small and metallic. What is that? I asked. We believe it's a portable hard drive, Kim said, likely containing financial records and client data for his entire operation. If we're right, it's evidence of crimes across multiple states, possibly international. My stomach tightened. Adrian had hidden proof of his fraud in my home. We need to recover it, Martinez continued. But if we raid the house, he'll know we found it. We'd prefer he come back for it himself. You want to use my house as bait, I said. We want him to incriminate himself while attempting to destroy evidence. Elena stepped forward from the doorway. Agents, my mother has already done enough. Asking her to put herself in danger isn't reasonable. Mrs. Romano, Agent Kim said calmly. Adrian is facing charges that could carry 20 years. He's desperate. Whether we set a trap or not, he may come back. But if we do, I said slowly, you'll be ready. Exactly. I looked again at the photo, thinking of Ruth Caldwell's frightened voice and Megan O'Connor's ruined business. Adrian had destroyed lives for profit. What would I need to do? I asked. Martinez explained the plan. I would call Adrian. Tell him Elena had left. Tell him I was scared, alone, and willing to make a deal. I would suggest that if he returned quietly to collect his belongings, I might reconsider cooperating with the investigation. He'll be suspicious, Agent Kim warned. Adrian is smart, and he knows you've already filed complaints against him. But he's also arrogant, I said. And arrogant men often believe they can talk their way out of situations that would terrify anyone else. There's one more thing, Agent Martinez added. You'll need to wear a wire during any conversation with Adrian. And you'll need to follow our instructions exactly. No improvising. No confronting him. I considered that in silence. A week ago my mornings had been quiet. Coffee on the deck, a book in my lap, unfinished watercolors drying in the sun. Now federal agents were asking me to help capture a fugitive inside my own home. When do we make the call? I asked. That evening, with FBI agents positioned around the property and recording equipment hidden throughout the house, I dialed Adrian's number. Judith. His voice was cautious, already guarded. Adrian, I'm glad you answered. I need to talk to you. Where's Elena? She left this morning. She's furious with both of us and wants nothing to do with this anymore. With what exactly? The police keep calling, I said. They're asking questions about you, about your business. Adrian, I'm scared. I don't understand what's happening. There was a brief pause. I could almost hear him calculating. Judith, he said calmly. I know this feels overwhelming, but the police are exaggerating. They're under pressure to make arrests. But Ruth Caldwell is confused, he interrupted smoothly. She doesn't understand complex financial instruments. The police are using her confusion to build a case that doesn't exist. Even knowing he was lying, I was struck by how sincere he sounded. I just want this to end, I said. I don't want courtrooms or prosecutions. I want my quiet life back. I want that too, Adrian replied. And I think we can make that happen. How? I need to come back to the house to retrieve a few personal items I left behind. If I collect them quietly and leave, this whole misunderstanding can be resolved. When? Tonight. Late. After the surveillance teams change shifts. Can you make sure the doors are unlocked? When I ended the call, Agent Martinez nodded. Perfect. He'll be here within 2 hours. And with that, Adrian Romano's criminal career was about to end. Still, I had a feeling his visit would reveal more than desperation. Men like Adrian always had contingency plans, and I suspected I was about to see his. He arrived at 2:47 a.m. From the upstairs window, I watched him move through my garden like a predator returning to familiar territory. He didn't look hunted. He looked confident, like a man who still believed he was in control. The FBI placed me in my bedroom with Agent Kim while Agent Martinez and 2 others waited in concealed positions downstairs. My instructions were simple. Let Adrian move, talk, and reveal himself. But as I watched him approach, I realized how dangerous confidence could be. He's at the front door, Agent Kim whispered into her radio. I heard the lock turn. The spare key, Elena's spare, slid easily into place. He'd kept it when he fled. He'd always planned to return. Judith. His voice drifted up from the living room. Judith, are you awake? I went downstairs in my robe and slippers, forcing my body into the posture of relief. Adrian stood in my kitchen, but the charm was gone. In its place was something colder, sharper. Thank God you're here, I said. I've been terrified. Have you? He stepped closer. That was when I saw it, a gun tucked into his waistband. I just want this nightmare to be over, I said. So do I, he replied evenly. So do I. He turned toward the guest room, then stopped. You know, I've been thinking about our conversation tonight, he said. About how frightened you are. About how badly you want this to end. Yes. And it made me realize something. You're not frightened at all, are you? The words hung between us, tight and dangerous. Of course I'm frightened, I said. The police. The investigation. The investigation you started, Adrian said calmly. The complaint you filed. The forensic accountant you hired. His voice was steady. His eyes were not. You've been playing me since the day I walked into this house. I heard movement upstairs. Agent Kim shifting, but Adrian stood between me and every possible exit. I don't know what you mean, I said. I think you do. His hand moved toward his waistband. I think you've known exactly what you were doing. That was the moment the FBI's carefully constructed plan unraveled. Federal agents. Agent Martinez's voice thundered from the kitchen entrance. Hands where I can see them. Adrian whirled around instantly, drawing his weapon in one smooth, practiced motion. I don't think so. Adrian dropped the weapon. Agent Kim ordered from the top of the staircase, her gun already raised. No one moves. His arm swung wildly between the two agents as panic finally cracked through his control. "Judith, you're coming with me," he shouted. "We're walking to my car and we're leaving. Right now." "Adrian, don't be stupid," I said, startled by how steady my voice sounded. "There are agents surrounding this house. Then they can watch you die if they try to stop me." Agent Martinez edged forward from the kitchen, slow and deliberate, while Agent Kim stayed frozen above us. Adrian was trapped, and that made him infinitely more dangerous. "What do you think you're going to accomplish?" I asked carefully. "I'm getting what I came for," he said. "And then you and I are disappearing until I can arrange safe passage out of the country." "And what exactly did you come for?" I asked. Adrian smiled, and for the first time since I had met him, it wasn't forced. It was real. "You actually thought it was about the hard drive," he said almost fondly. "That thing is worthless. Everything that matters is stored on offshore servers the FBI will never touch." He gestured with the gun toward the living room. "What I came back for is worth far more than financial records." "What?" I asked. "You," he said. "I came back for you." The word struck me like a blow to the chest. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "Do you have any idea what your testimony is worth?" he continued. "You're their star witness, the victim who figured it out, documented everything, and had the nerve to report it." His smile widened. "If something unfortunate happened to you, their entire case collapses." "Adrian," Agent Kim warned from the stairs, "you're only making this worse." "Am I?" he said calmly. "Because eliminating the prosecution's primary witness sounds like excellent crisis management to me." Cold spread through my chest as the truth finally settled in. He hadn't returned for evidence. He hadn't returned for belongings. He had come back to kill me. "The other victims can still testify," I said. "Elderly victims," he replied smoothly, "with fading memories talking about financial structures they never truly understood. Without you, your records, your credibility, I can beat those charges." "You're surrounded," Agent Martinez said firmly. "You're not leaving this house alive if you hurt Mrs. Holloway." "Maybe not," Adrian replied. "But she's definitely not leaving alive if I don't get exactly what I want." And then something shifted. Adrian was right about being cornered. But he was wrong about being in control. Because while his attention stayed locked on the agents and his escape fantasy, he forgot about the one person in the room who had been planning 3 steps ahead of him all along. "You're forgetting something," I said, stepping closer. "What?" he snapped. "You're not the only one who prepared for tonight." I pressed the panic button Agent Kim had given me earlier. But instead of triggering a standard alarm, it activated something Adrian never could have anticipated. Every light in the house cut out at once, plunging us into sudden total darkness. But more importantly, the electromagnetic pulse generator Stephen Aldridge had hidden in my basement activated, disabling every electronic device within a 50-foot radius, including Adrian's gun, which relied on an electronic safety mechanism. In the sudden darkness and Adrian's startled shouts, I heard Agent Martinez moving toward us. Adrian fired twice, but nothing happened. "What the hell?" His voice was panicked now. "Surprise, Adrian," I said from somewhere in the dark. "Turns out this helpless middle-aged woman had a few more tricks than you expected." 30 seconds later, the lights came back on, revealing Adrian face down on the floor, Agent Martinez kneeling on his back while Agent Kim secured the weapon. "That was not part of the plan," Agent Kim said, looking at me with a mix of admiration and frustration. "No," I agreed. "But it worked." As they led Adrian away in handcuffs, he turned back to look at me one last time. "This isn't over, Judith." "Yes, Adrian," I said. "It really is." Still, as the FBI car disappeared down my driveway, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was right about one thing. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. 3 days after Adrian's arrest, I realized that catching a federal fugitive in my living room had been the easy part. The harder part was dealing with what he left behind, both literally and figuratively. "Mom, you can't stay here," Elena said for the 5th time that morning. "What if Adrian has associates who decide to finish what he started?" We sat on my deck, watching federal agents search every inch of my property for additional evidence. Agent Martinez had already warned me that Adrian's operation was sophisticated enough to involve others who might see me as a threat. Elena, I'm not running away from my own home because of Adrian's associates. This isn't about running, she said. It's about being smart. Being smart is exactly what got us here. I gestured toward the FBI team dismantling the guest room. If I'd been less smart, Adrian would have stolen my house and probably killed me. That's not reassuring. Agent Kim approached then, carrying a laptop bag and wearing an expression I'd learned to associate with serious news. Mrs. Holloway, we need to talk about what we found in Adrian's hidden files. It goes beyond fraud. She sat at the patio table and opened the laptop. Adrian wasn't just running investment scams. He was part of an organized network that targets affluent women. They call it asset liberation. Asset liberation, systematic theft through relationship manipulation. They identified women with valuable assets, researched their lives and vulnerabilities, then assigned operatives to establish romantic or family connections to gain access. Elena looked sick. You're saying Adrian was assigned to target my mother? Yes, Agent Kim said. He didn't meet you by accident. You were selected because of your relationship to her and her property. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. How long? Your property was flagged 18 months ago. Adrian spent 6 months researching your family dynamics before approaching your daughter. Elena stared at the screen in horror. Everything was planned. Where we met. What he liked. Even my hobbies. Psychological profiling, Agent Kim said, turning the laptop toward us. Detailed assessments of your personality, finances, routines, and relationships. I saw the file title clearly. Judith Holloway Target Assessment. Below it were subfiles. Financial assets, psychological vulnerabilities, social connections. And one more. Elimination protocols. What are elimination protocols? I asked, though I already knew I wouldn't like the answer. Contingency plans, Agent Kim said quietly, for when a target becomes a problem. In your case, she added, there were 3 options: discreditation, incapacitation, or termination. Termination, Elena whispered. They planned to kill her only if the other methods failed, Agent Kim said. But Mrs. Holloway's resistance to Adrian's initial approach triggered their escalation protocols. I thought about Adrian standing in my kitchen with a gun, calmly explaining that my death would collapse the federal case against him. It hadn't been a moment of panic. It had been a calculated business decision. How many other women are being targeted right now? I asked. At least 30 active operations across 12 states, Agent Kim replied. 30 women who had no idea they were being systematically manipulated by professionals. I walked to the deck railing and looked out at the ocean that had been my sanctuary for 5 years. The waves were unchanged, steady, and familiar. But everything else felt irrevocably different. What happens next? I asked. Adrian has agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. He's providing details about the network's leadership, structure, and current targets. And the other women? We're working to identify and protect them, Agent Kim said carefully. But your case is critical. You're the only target who recognized the scam early and documented it well enough to build a federal prosecution. Which meant, you'll need to testify, she continued, in multiple trials over the next 2 years. And you'll need ongoing protection during that time. Elena stood abruptly. 2 years? Mom, you can't live under federal protection for 2 years. Actually, Agent Kim said, we have another option. She explained that the FBI was forming a task force focused on romance and family-based fraud targeting older adults. They needed someone with first-hand experience, someone who could recognize manipulation patterns and help train agents. You want me to be a federal consultant? I asked. We want you to help prevent what happened to Ruth Caldwell and Megan O'Connor, and what's happening right now to other women. I thought about Ruth's frightened voice, about Megan losing her business, about the 30 women currently being studied and groomed by criminals who had reduced their lives to data points. What would that involve? I asked. Training agents and victims, reviewing case files, identifying patterns, and occasionally assisting undercover operations. Elena shook her head. Mom, that sounds dangerous. More dangerous than ignoring it? I asked gently. I turned to her. Adrian fooled you. He fooled Megan. He fooled Ruth. He fooled dozens of women. He didn't fool me because I stopped believing charm was the same thing as character. I looked back at Agent Kim. What kind of protection would there be? Full surveillance, backup teams, and extraction protocols. You wouldn't be alone. Like the arrest operation? I asked. Agent Kim winced. That situation exposed gaps. We've corrected them. I spent the rest of the afternoon thinking. That evening, while Elena cooked dinner, I called Megan O'Connor. Judith, she said. How are you holding up? I'm all right. But tell me something. If someone had warned you about Adrian before he destroyed your business, would it have mattered? Yes, she said without hesitation. If I'd known what to look for, I never would have trusted him with my company. Even if that someone had to put themselves at risk to reach you? Megan was quiet for a moment. Are you thinking about working with the FBI? I'm thinking about making sure Adrian's network doesn't destroy any more lives. Then she surprised me. Then I think you should do it. And I think you should know. I'm planning to do it too. After I hung up, I found Elena on the deck with 2 glasses of wine. She handed one to me as I sat down. Mom, I need to tell you something, she said. I've been thinking about everything that's happened. About how Adrian manipulated both of us. About how I let him treat you. She took a breath. I've spent my whole adult life looking for someone else to make me feel important. Valuable. Worth something. She stared out at the ocean. Adrian was just the latest person I thought would complete me. And now I realize maybe I need to learn how to do that myself first. She took a sip of wine, then looked at me. I want to help with this FBI task force. Elena, you don't have the experience, I said gently. I have a different kind of experience, she replied. I know what it feels like to be manipulated. I know how men like Adrian make you feel chosen, while they're actually using you. Her voice steadied. Maybe there are other women who need to hear from someone who fell for it completely, before they learn how to see through it. As we watched the sun sink into the water, I realized Adrian's biggest mistake hadn't been underestimating me. It had been bringing us together in a way that forced us both to become stronger than we'd ever been on our own. Tomorrow I would call Agent Kim and accept her proposal. Tonight, I was simply grateful that my daughter had finally learned the difference between being valued and being used. Adrian's network had no idea what was coming. 6 months later, I was sitting in a coffee shop in Portland, pretending to read a romance novel, while watching a woman named Nancy Whitaker have lunch with the man who planned to steal her house. His name was Daniel Frost, Adrian's former partner, and according to FBI intelligence, the current operational leader of what the task force now called the Heartbreak Network. Nancy was 58, a widow who had inherited a successful bed and breakfast from her late husband. Daniel had been courting her for 3 months. Judith, can you see the subject clearly? Agent Lynn's voice murmured through the nearly invisible earpiece. I can see both of them, I replied softly into the microphone hidden in my book jacket. He's showing her documents. That's the property management proposal, Lynn said. He's about to suggest she needs professional help. I watched Daniel lean forward, wearing the same practice concern I'd once seen across my own kitchen table. Nancy nodded, visibly flattered. Judith, you need to intervene now, Lynn said. She's close to signing. I closed my book and approached their table, summoning every ounce of harmless confusion I could manage. Excuse me, I said to Nancy. Aren't you Nancy Whitaker? We met at a grief support group in Salem. She blinked. I'm sorry, I don't think so. Oh my goodness, I said warmly. You look so much like a woman I met who went through exactly what I did. Daniel studied me carefully. A charming man convinced her to let him manage her late husband's business, I continued. Turned out he was stealing everything. I'm sorry, Daniel said smoothly, but we're in the middle of a private business meeting. Of course, I said, starting to turn away, then hesitating. Nancy, just be careful about anyone offering investment advice too soon after a loss. These predators specifically target widows with valuable property. Ma'am, Daniel said sharply, you're being inappropriate. You're probably right, I smiled sweetly. I'm sure you're nothing like Adrian Romano. Daniel froze. Who? He asked. Adrian Romano, I repeated. Same approach. Same concern for proper asset management. He's in federal prison now for elder fraud. Nancy's expression shifted. Daniel, do you know who she's talking about? I've never heard that name, Daniel said, but his eyes never left mine. Oh, you probably wouldn't have, I said lightly. It was quite a scandal. A whole network targeting women with valuable real estate, psychological profiling, relationship manipulation, asset theft. Nancy's hand slowly withdrew from the paperwork. That sounds terrible. It was, I said. And for the first time doubt had entered the room. Poor Ruth Caldwell lost her entire family home. Megan O'Connor lost her business. I looked directly at Daniel. Though I suppose you'd know more about Megan O'Connor than I would. Daniel pushed back his chair abruptly. Nancy, we should continue this conversation somewhere else. Actually, I said, calmly sitting in the chair he'd just vacated. I think Nancy deserves to hear about the investigation before she signs anything. Investigation? Nancy asked, her voice tight. The FBI task force currently tracking at least 12 active operations targeting widows with valuable property, I said. They use detailed psychological profiles, carefully rehearsed backstories, even fabricated references. Daniel was already edging away from the table. Nancy, this woman is unstable, he snapped. We need to leave. I think you should sit down, Daniel, I said. He turned and stopped. Agent Lynn was standing directly behind him, her badge clearly visible. FBI Financial Crimes Task Force. After that, everything moved quickly. Daniel had enough outstanding warrants that there was no fight over extradition, and the documents in his briefcase tied him to at least 6 other ongoing cases. As Agent Lynn led him away, Nancy stared at the paperwork still spread across the table. I was really going to sign these, she said quietly. Probably, I replied gently. Daniel is very good at what he does. But he won't be doing it anymore. That evening, I called Elena from my hotel room in Portland. How did it go, Mom? We prevented another victim and arrested a major player in Adrian's network. I'd call that a good day. How many now? 14 prevented thefts. 7 major arrests. About $2 million recovered and returned to victims. Elena was silent for a moment. Do you ever regret getting involved in all this? I thought about Nancy Whitaker, who would go home tonight to her bed and breakfast instead of signing away her future. About Ruth Caldwell, whose home had been pulled back from foreclosure. About the 37 women currently sleeping peacefully in houses that were still theirs. Do you remember when Adrian first suggested I needed help managing my life? I asked. Unfortunately, yes. That was the moment I understood something. I said. The world is full of people who assume women like me are helpless, confused, and grateful for guidance. Adrian was just the criminal version of an attitude that's everywhere. And now? Elena asked. Now I spend my time proving we're not helpless. We're not confused. And we definitely don't need guidance from men who see our independence as a problem. Especially when it's dangerous. 2 days later, I was back on my deck in Malibu, watching the waves while reviewing files for the next operation. Agent Kim would arrive tomorrow to brief me on a new network operating out of Phoenix. Elena was driving down from Los Angeles for the weekend. My phone rang. Megan O'Connor. Judith, I wanted to update you on the Seattle operation. How did it go? 3 more victims protected. And we confirmed a connection to the Miami case you worked last month. This network keeps getting bigger, I said. Unfortunately, yes, Megan replied. But there's something deeply satisfying about using Adrian's own methods against his associates. After we hung up, I sat in the fading light, thinking about how much had changed. A year ago, I'd been a woman enjoying a quiet life in a beach house. Now, I was a federal consultant helping protect other women from sophisticated predators. Adrian had been right about one thing, just not in the way he'd imagined. His arrest wasn't a conclusion of any kind. It was a starting line. It sparked the creation of a task force that soon became a template for other states. It opened the door to coordinated efforts with victim advocacy organizations and elder protection agencies. It led to congressional hearings on romance fraud and rail legislative momentum to give prosecutors stronger, sharper tools. But more than anything, it ignited something Adrian never saw coming. A growing network of women who refused to be reduced to victims. My phone buzzed with a message from Elena. Just past the exit to your place. I can't wait to hear everything about Portland. Agent Kim called too. They want both of us on the Phoenix operation. You in? I smiled and typed back one word. Always. Later that night, as I got ready for bed in my home, my safe, defended, undeniably mine home, I thought about Adrian sitting alone in a federal prison cell. He had built his entire life around the assumption that women like me were isolated, defenseless, and easy to manipulate. He'd been wrong about more than just my vulnerability. The next day, Elena and I would begin mapping out how to dismantle yet another criminal operation. The following week, Megan O'Connor and I would testify before Congress about the realities of romance fraud. And the month after that, I'd be standing in front of a new group of FBI agents, teaching them how to recognize the quiet psychological tactics predators rely on. Adrian had tried to take my house. What he gave me instead was a purpose larger than any property, more valuable than any account balance, and far more fulfilling than the peaceful retirement I once imagined. Because revenge isn't always about retaliation. Sometimes it's about evolution. And the one thing Adrian never anticipated was this: that the woman he dismissed as helpless and expendable would become someone determined to make sure men like him never succeed again. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.